From the hidden corners of government files to eyewitness accounts of everyday people, dive deep into the mysteries of the galaxies. The Mutual UFO Network has been uncovering our galactic truth since 1969, and now we share that truth with you. Welcome to MUFON Contact Radio with your host Earl Grey Anderson, exclusively on the KGRA Digital Broadcasting Network. So buckle up, Buttercup, and join Earl on a voyage through the universe with MUFON Contact Radio.
Hey, how are you guys doing? Well, you are going to have to buckle up for this episode. I'm really excited and proud to be presenting Katie Paige today. Katie is, she heads up this group called Rocky Mountain Research. There you go, is the logo. I don't know that she needs introduction. I mean, unless you guys have been living in a cave somewhere. Katie has been tip of the spear in research, and we have seen this activity that seems to follow these different ranches and families that own these ranches. From Skinwalker Ranch, you've got the Bullfrog Ranch thing that's going on. And now, of course, the Mount Wilson Ranch that Katie has been sort of leading the charge on, which actually affects me in my life. The Mount Wilson Ranch was originally owned by the one and only Howard Hughes, my mom's old employer. So, but anyway, without any further ado, I might as well let's bring Katie in here today. Hi there, Katie. How are you doing?
I'm doing wonderful. Happy holidays. I'm super excited to be here, Earl. You know, we're good buddies, so it's always fun to just sit and discuss our favorite topics with friends. So I'm looking forward to this.
I was so thrilled. You know, we were both speakers at Contact in the Desert this year, and we were back to back. They had you come out. They had the stage all done beautifully.
Oh, there we are.
There we are. That's actually from the Denver MUFON Symposium, I think about 3-4 years ago.
Right.
But I think, was that the first time that I've ever met you in person? I think it might have been, actually. I've known you like internet and texting and stuff like that for long, for quite a while. But I think that was the first time that we actually met. It was a hug that was a long time coming, and that was it. So, but it's so interesting. I think, I was just thinking about this whole week, in preparation for our show together, how we both kind of got into this in the same manner. For a lot of people, maybe they've seen a UFO and it gave them that big 50-foot question mark, and that's sort of the impetus for their research. But for you and for myself, it's like a familial thing. It's part of our lives since childhood. And we're going to go into that. We have a lot of ground to cover here.
Me too.
But so now you have recently written a new book about one of my heroes of ufology, actually Dr. Leo Sprinkle, who was one of the early gentlemen that was investigating and taking seriously the experiencer phenomenon. Could you talk a little bit about your new book and why you wrote it, what it's about, and Dr. Sprinkle as well?
It's been out for a little while, but we'll say it's new. But kind of what happened there, like you talked about, Earl, we kind of come into this, from experiences early on, and we'll get into that a little bit later. But basically, the Rocky Mountain Ranch, where I had experiences as a young girl, we were threatened and warned to never talk about what happened out there. And it wasn't until I bought Colm Kelleher, PhDs, and George Knapp's book, Hunt for the Skinwalker, that I learned that the ranch of my childhood was even investigated and known about at all. And you can imagine the shock. I mean, I was on the phone with my mom, with my sister, like, you're not going to believe this. But in this book, they talk about 3 PhDs that were out there investigating the Rocky Mountain Ranch in the mid to late 70s, including, you know, Linda Moulton Howe, who was an investigative journalist out there. And the mutilations were just at the peak. I mean, they were just almost happening daily. But we learned of Dr. Leo Sprinkle, who is, like you mentioned, a psychologist out of Laramie, Wyoming. And as soon as I learned that he was one of the original investigators, he's old school. I wrote him a letter, say, hey, because back in the day, in the report, so this briefing document, they refer to the ranch as the Clearview Ranch. So in folklore, in ufology, if you read any old articles about the Rocky Mountain Ranch, it was referred to as the Clearview Ranch. The location was unknown. The people, they changed all the names. So nobody really knew who or where this location was. And so I wrote Dr. Leo Sprinkle a letter saying who I was, the real names. Is this in fact the ranch of my childhood? He wrote me a letter right away. You know, 2 weeks later, I was sitting in his office talking with him. And through that, all his research over 40 plus years is housed at the American Heritage Center out there in Laramie. So anybody can go access his many years of research. And what happened with the book is I woke up out of a dream one night and went, oh my gosh, letters of love and light. So I spent 3 years going back and forth to the archives, just pulling letters, taking pictures of the letters, and I organized them into chapters. And I thought, well, if I find some of these interesting, other people will too. And Leo would always sign his letters, Love and Light Leo. So that's where the name for the book came from. But basically, it's just, you know, there was even a early report before Travis Walton in 1975 of another possible abduction out there in Snowflake, Arizona. We talk about sightings at Francis Warren Military Base out there in Cheyenne, Wyoming. Many different letters from children, ET craft descriptions. We talk about hypnosis. We talk about motives. We talk about implants. So, and what was cool about that project was, number one, I got to finish the book and hand it to Leo before he passed away. And so one of my most cherished possessions is a personal letter from Leo about that. And, but what's cool is he kept all his response letters. So I kind of, because, you know, when you are in this field, you correspond, I mean, even with the naysayers like Phil Klass. So I got to see his interactions with like Linda Howe and Phil Klass and other people in the field. And I kind of got to see how his ideas about the phenomena changed through the decades. And that was kind of a cool journey to go on personally, right? And then I interviewed Leo and I'm like, did you have any regrets? You know, you're spending 40 plus years of your life trying to find answers. And now, you know, unfortunately he battled cancer there at the end, and he knew he may not find the answers he was seeking. And how did he feel about that? And, you know, Leo would always go, yeehaw, you know, and he'd say, you know, it's about the journey. It's always about the journey. It's not about the destination. So enjoy the ride. And that's what I do. So I always, have Leo's words of wisdoms kind of rattling in my head all the time, but he was just a fabulous man. Just, a gem.
I think of him, you know, there's the golden age of ufology where you see people like McDonald and of course, Dr. J. Allen Hynek and Jacques Vallée and Leo Sprinkle was one of those early guys that took abduction cases and visitation cases very, very seriously. You know, it was kind of, you know, not a whole lot of people up front. You had Bud Hopkins, where it was kind of a threat, you know, and of course, I mean that seemed to be the main thrust out there early on is that, you know, that they're taking our place in the world, you know, as a hybridization program, we're being replaced and all this stuff. But Leo was one of those guys like John Mack, where he didn't see it as a threat so much that he was open-minded that perhaps this was actually a benevolent activity that was going on.
He did think that. And I mean, he was all, he was into like the Tesla information and free energy.
Yeah.
He was really, interestingly enough, about, raising consciousness and women kind of finding equality and finding their power and voice, because that's something you always talk to me about.
Heck yeah.
Yeah, but he was all about love and light and consciousness, and he certainly took heat, like going through the newspaper articles, because he would like to go speak publicly about it when he can. He did early conferences early on out there, and but he would go into schools, sometimes elementary schools, sometimes junior high schools. And boy, did he take the heat for that. I mean, there were school districts that did not want this discussed in any way. So, he fought the good fight in just making it a topic where people felt comfortable, discussing these strange things. And even like the McGuire Ranch is another one of these ranches out there in Wyoming that was a hot spot, a high strangeness location. And he did a lot of investigating out there. He did the Carl Higdon case, which is an important case we could touch on. But, the Snippy, the horse case, which we'll definitely talk about in the second hour. But
was the name actually Snippy? That's a controversy.
It's not. It's not anymore, Earl. It is not anymore. And I will be presenting a contact in the
Snippy question.
I did, and he is Snippy through and through.
Oh my God. Oh my God.
Yeah.
I'm so excited.
Yeah,
So
the photos that we uncovered about him, we have the first pictures of Snippy alive as a colt with his mother lady. So I'm so excited to share that at Contact in the Desert this year.
Oh, fabulous. So we talked about this a little bit before we went on air. So what is this weird thing about families and ranches and phenomenology? It seems obviously it's a thing. We see it over and over and over again now with the Mount Wilson Ranch, which we'll go into in the second hour, which, my mom might have actually had a hand in some of that stuff that happened there. What's your hypothesis, your best hypothesis as to why ranches? Why? Well,
there's so many, and that's just it. It's not a simple answer. It's a multi-layered cake. There's so many components that go into these locations. And I think that's where it gets really confusing and convoluted for researchers and investigators like ourselves that go out there and we're trying to find these answers and follow these little breadcrumbs of clues. And we want simple answers, but through my research over a decade now, it's led me down so many different paths. And I think they're all have relevancy in what the answers are. And, just like the Rocky Mountain Ranch, where you have, several acres of all these high strangeness things happening, both paranormal in nature, this hitchhiker effect, and the mutilations and the UFO sightings and the orbs and the cryptids and on. And we'll get into all of that. But where people think it's isolated to this one property, just like with Skinwalker or Blind Frog Ranch, and that they're not. In the Rocky Mountain Ranch location, it's, the whole Palmer Divide area, the whole Black Forest in Elbert County from, Franktown and Douglas County, but from Franktown to Elizabeth to Kiowa to Rama to Simla, this whole area is having high strangeness. And the more and more I'm meeting people and talking to ranchers, and it's not just the mutilations, it's the paranormal stuff too. And so what is attracting these areas? We do know they're all highly magnetic areas, like pinging the charts. So magnetism is important, aquifers in the water, the minerals, but then you have that layer of the individual people and the Native American connection, where we have like over 10 different tribes, nomadic tribes that are going through. I mean, both the Uinta Basin and in Colorado, the Ute, the Cheyenne, the Kiowa, the Comanche, the Pawnee, the Cherokee, the Kiowa, and all of that.
And this is part of their spirituality. But for the Native Americans, it's the star people. It's the star people.
Yeah. And even in the San Luis Valley, I mean, the San Luis Valley, that's a sacred locations where we did not have warring tribes because they held that ground so sacred. So if you came into the San Luis Valley, it was a place of peace, right?
Wow.
And so that all plays a part in that. And do memories like a tape recording, just like if you even think of the paranormal and you go to Estes Park to the Stanley Hotel, where you have the water and the granite and the minerals and the history there, is that able to retain spiritual memories? You know, they talk about, oh, it's haunted because it's on a sacred burial site. There might be something to that, you know, so it's just this magical combination.
Yeah, well, there you go.
But, you know, we just the other day, Monday, we came home from being back at, you know, Rio Rancho, New Mexico, and going through archives again. And on the way home back to Colorado, we stopped in Trinidad and talked with the Wilsons, who own, I mean, the Millers, not the Wilsons, the Millers, Sally and Tom Miller, who is also on Beyond Skinwalker. And they've had many, I think they said 17 mutilations since the 90s on their property. And what was interesting when I sat down to interview them, and it'll be an upcoming episode on Rocky Mountain Ranch Research, my YouTube channel. So I try to put episodes out every week or two of me going out there and investigating. Yeah. So if people out there, if you could go to Rocky Mountain Ranch Research with Katie Paige and give me a subscribe, that really helps me out. But, you know, I try to go out there on location and bring people with me. And this will be one of those episodes. And I wanted to kind of get away from the strange mutilations, because that's a whole topic we could spend 2 hours on in of itself. But we talked about more the hitchhiker stuff. And I was floored at how much the Millers had similarities to what I've experienced. And then talking with her and knowing her Irish, Scottish descent, and talking to, you know, Chuck Zukowski,
Same
right,
here.
Earl? Same you, right? I see it all the time. And so I was talking to, you know, Chuck Zukowski, and others have kind of theorized that there may be something to that not only do the mutilations follow geographical locations, but also families as well. And, you know, through all the work you've done with experiencers and Leo and even Jacques Vallée, they see this pattern of the phenomenon following family lines and family lineage.
Yes.
So there's something to that. And I think that's an important piece, but there's just so many different pieces of this puzzle. And it's like a stew pot of this magical formula, right? And you go, oh, there we go. Right.
These are the commonalities. I mean, we see these commonalities between Skinwalker Ranch, which I think is the one that probably the public is most aware of because of the show and the books and everything else. But as you were saying, it's not like there's this borderline and it's just retained behind this wall at Skinwalker. No, it seems like it's this whole area. And the people involved and the bloodlines, you know, I mean, our families, our ancestors, when they came over, you know, to Ellis Island, there were some distinct places where they homesteaded. And this seems to be one of the major areas, which is very, very, I don't know, very interesting. What, just in a nutshell, why mutilations? What's your personal, you know, I know that it's a question mark with all these things, but where do you kind of land as far as why they're doing this particular thing? Right.
And again, we're talking even with the Miller Ranch, the Rocky Mountain Ranch, the Skinwalker, military. There's that whole other category, right, where we have military bases close by this phenomenon too. So some of it is our own military. So for me, it was a question of which came first, the chicken or the egg. Was there a military was there a military presence, you know, before or after the phenomenon? And through the research and going back, you know, to the earliest records that I can find of owners of the Rocky Mountain Ranch, one of the people that was born and raised on the ranch was Dick Mulligan, and it was the Mulligan homestead.
Good Irish name there.
Right. He was an Irish man. He was. So again, you have that piece, right? Interestingly enough.
Yeah.
And so Dick Mulligan, if you research him on the internet, you could put in Dick Mulligan Winter Park Ski Resort. And they talk about he had a reputation for having bold exaggeration in the gift of gab, right? And telling these wild stories. And I'm like, well, I think old Dick Mulligan wasn't exaggerating or telling
Yeah.
tall tales. He grew up on that ranch property, and I think people just didn't believe him. So that predated the military presence, right? So we kind of know, and from other neighbors in the area that are generational, a lot of these ranches are generational ranchers, just like the guy they just had on the new George Knapp Netflix special. They had Investigation Alien, where they talked to that 5-time generational rancher out there in Oregon. This stuff predates the military. So I believe that the military is like, what's going on here? Let's try to recreate. Let's try and figure out. So some of those mutes are probably conducted by military. I'm thinking testing, radiation, fallout, water, all that kind of mad cow disease, all that. But this has been going on for decades and decades. I mean, I mentioned Chuck Zukowski earlier, Christopher O'Brien, who sadly we just lost. The community lost Chris. I know
he was
did so much. Yeah, he was. And he did so much work on, the San Luis Valley and the mutilations. And of course,
Stalking the Herd.
Stalking the
That's
Herd.
That's a go-to book, on this subject.
Sure is. All his books are. And all these people, I mean, it's still a mystery that's not solved. And
David
we're not
Perkins,
talking just
that was another guy, that was.
Yeah, David Perkins. And I feel like even with Carl Higdon, we have, and I just had a recent, and we'll talk about here in a little bit, but out there in Elbert County, we have this elk connection. So yes, we recognize when ranchers lose livestock because it costs them money. But there's also other animals like elk and deer and other animals. We've had reports of dog, even cat, unfortunately, kangaroo. So these mutilations are occurring around the world of different types of animals. What are they doing? Why are they doing it? Boy, oh boy, your guess is as good as mine. I know there's been thoughts of
they're going for soft tissue.
Soft tissue. They're draining the blood. What are they testing for? I have no idea. I wish I had the answers to that, but it's continuing. At the Miller Ranch, they just had a mutilation next door. So the Millers do not have cattle anymore. They stopped because they were losing so many, but now their neighbors are hit.
Wow.
So, yeah.
See, my personal feeling was it had something to do with the radiation. It seemed like all these sites were sort of downwind of the Trinity test site from, the first atomic bomb. But, that's the way I felt about it maybe 7, 8 years ago. And I don't know if that's what it is anymore. It may be, and maybe for dual purposes, it may be sort of a multifaceted reason for this. But it sure is weird. And it has a macabre kind of thing to it. Certainly, and of course, as you were saying, for these ranchers, it hits them in the wallet, It
sure does. It sure does.
Yeah.
Yeah. And there's so many strange cases. And while we're on the topic, we'll just go there. And I think I sent some photos.
Snowless Circle. I want to hear about that.
Want to go there? Okay, we'll go there first, and then we'll go back to the mutilation case. But yeah, the Snowless Circle, that's one of my memories. And I just want to put it out there. I did not live on the Rocky Mountain Ranch full time. My mother worked for United Airlines. She was dating the gentleman that owned it. And they had 3 sons. The youngest son is around my same age. The middle son was around the same age as my older sister. And then they had an older boy. And so the 2 younger sons lived with us during the week and went to Cherry Creek School District because it's a really big school district here in Colorado instead of the small little country school there in, Elbert County. So we would commute the boys back and forth, and we'd spend, a Saturday there or whatever when they visit their mom and stuff like that. So both my sister and I had encounters that occurred together, and then we had our own separate experiences on the property. But for me, that hitchhiker thing, which I didn't know at the time until just recently with skinwalkers at the Pentagon and all that, I kind of compartmentalized all these different things. And I thought, well, I'm just living in a haunted house. I'm just seeing shadow figures. And when I was younger, I didn't connect it to the ranch, right? So for me, it was like this was happening at the ranch, and we were hearing whisperings about police being called and, mutilations being done, and that feeling of being watched and all that. But one of the things that happened, me and my sister were at the ranch with the boys, and it was a snowy day. The sun was shining. It was nice, but there was snow on the ground. So we decided to go flip the Frisbee out front. And we looked down at our feet, and there was this very large snowless circle. And it was dry as dry can be, but everything else was wet and snowy. And what was so cool about that, when I ended up getting the original briefing documents, they talked, and I think I have a photo of the exact quote from
I think
the
we
document.
have one there.
Yeah. It talks about, that they were not only one, but two of these snowless circles on the property. They measured 75 feet in diameter, and there were drops of blood in the snow outside of the snowless circle. And what's more interesting about that now is, through other researchers and data, there was just a PhD who did a big study on these different types of craft and the data they're finding in connection with them, and the 75 foot in diameter keeps coming up over and over again. It came up just recently with the Snippy case as well, 75 foot diameter markings on the ground. So there's something to that measurement. I find that fascinating.
Is that photo? I think my producer has it in there, where you can see the snow and there's like a circle in the photo.
Right. That's a recreation I met. That's why I keep going back to the archives, but the quote in there is actually from the report, where it talks about that 75 foot in diameter circle. Not that. That's similarities between the Skinwalker Ranch and the Rocky Mountain Ranch. One of the first things that was reported on the ranch were these strange humming sounds, bangs underground, where there's nothing under there that should be causing that. And interesting too, the Miller Ranch has that same low pitch hum sound. What is that? Of course, we talked about mutilations, the circle on the ground, orb sightings. There are some headlines from back in the day. Clearview is close encounter capital of the U.S. Town has unusual amount of UFOs. This is, again, when it was referred to as the Clearview Ranch. So, it did make headlines. Here's the quote.
I think there we go.
Yeah, there it is. That's the quote. We stopped at the area where the UFO had been sighted. It was a large, perfectly round circle with only small patches of snow on it. The snow around the outside of the circle was at least 4 inches deep. There was a drop of blood on the snow just a few inches outside of the snowless circle. So when I read that in the report, having the memory, my sister and I of actually doing that, that's a whole other night. We'll get to that in a little bit. But that was incredible for us to see that in the report, because it's such a vivid memory for us. And it's such a weird thing to remember too, right? You're just flipping the Frisbee, but it was so unusual. And that sense of being watched was really intense. And you hear that from other people as well.
Yes.
Did you ever have that, Earl, that sense of being watched?
Yeah. When I was a teenager, and when I was a teenager, we lived in Thousand Oaks, California, but it was back then. When I grew up there, we were the end of the block, and then there was 5 miles of wilderness. There was a mountain across the street that we'd climb up, and this mountain had such a massive amount of crystals that my cousin and I would go up with, a pickaxe and stuff, and we would come back with these bundles of these beautiful crystals that we just brought out of the ground. But I think that I experienced some of the hitchhiker effect when I was a teenager. Unfortunately, I had some friends that were into Anton LaVey's work. And he had an area near Thousand Oaks where they would do rituals. And my friends found out where this was. They got the location. And so I must have been maybe 15 years old, and I was tagging along. My friends were all older than me, and I didn't feel very comfortable about it. I didn't want to mess with ghosts and stuff like that. But I will swear to my dying day, we went there in the middle of the night, and there were these blue glows that were human shaped that were interacting with us. And I didn't think this stuff was real. And there was sort of a dark element to this. I was very uncomfortable with it. I have Christian upbringing as a young kid, And you're not supposed to mess with this stuff. But
Right.
I wanted to be cool. I went along with them. Well, when I came home, I started having these strange sort of, I guess you would call them visitations at night, where I would be afraid. I'd have to turn the lights on in my room, make sure the closet is shut. I mean, this is the stuff that a scared little boy does. But yet I was like 16 years old when this was happening. Yeah. I do not experience a hitchhiker effect now. It doesn't happen now. It seems like it's kind of a benevolent, synchronistic force that is in my life at this point. Thank goodness. Right. Because I didn't like that other stuff.
There's definitely that piece of it too. We talked about all these different pieces. That's a big one. And I learned some things about the property when I did Beyond Skinwalker that was down that line, right, of things that they found, like an altar and some questionable activities going on there at the ranch that could open up something not so nice. So it's important to protect yourself and surround yourself with that love and light and that positivity, because there's certainly that element to it. And I get asked that quite often, like, I've had, the shadow figures and things that can seem quite frightening. But I also think a couple things. There has been great PhD studies on childhood trauma, or just trauma, even for adults that get it's like a disassociation. So we can disassociate for many reasons. We can disassociate when we meditate, when we do remote viewing. Trauma can cause us to disassociate, right? Near-death experiences can cause us to disassociate. And when we tend to leave our physical bodies and disassociate for whatever reason, I think we tap into and connect to something positive, negative, or in the middle. I don't know, but our intentions have a lot to do with that. And for me, I had a half brother who was in Pueblo State Hospital most of his life and in halfway houses. He burnt down 2 of our homes, one in Lake Geneva, Wisconsin, one out here in Colorado. And, alcoholic father. Sorry, Dad. I hate to throw you under the bus sometimes, but he was a person that when you're a little kid, you have to read what father's walking through the door. Is it the abusive things flying and breaking? Or is it going to be the one that plays games, and hides the can and fun dad or scary dad, fun dad or scary dad. And kids that grow up with that, you tap into those other senses, and you have to read people really quickly. And I really feel, and there's, like I said, there's been research done about trauma and the paranormal and that hitchhiker effect. And maybe it opens yourself up to things, but you really have to be careful with that self-protection and making sure your intentions and motives are in the right place. And I tell myself that every time, even that strange bridge at the Miller Ranch, we stopped and flew the drone over that bridge. There's been so many car accidents and things. I mean, way more than average. It's a country road, a straight road. It's not hilly, but so many accidents over this bridge. And on Beyond Skinwalker, they're doing, there's high different readings and they're under the bridge and around the bridge. And I felt uncomfortable being around that bridge. So even a woman, Sally Miller, was telling me there was a woman talking on her cell phone, pulled over next to the bridge, and something moved her car, like an energy. Oh so even God. even there, I was like, oh my
I've
gosh.
heard that before, but
Like
different story though, not the same one.
It's uncomfortable.
Yeah. So, well, the phenomena gets personal. And that's what a lot of people don't realize. When I went into this, studying this phenomenon, I had a very naive outlook on what it was. I thought that it was something that was remote from me. I thought that it was like a scientist looking at something that was on a microscope slide, and there was this distance between myself and the phenomenon. And I found out that that's not true, that if you poke, and this is what I told my field investigators when I trained them, I still tell them this, that just be aware that when you poke at the phenomenon, it's interactive. It pokes back.
It sure does.
And I guess I found out when I was a kid, you know. I mean, this stuff, it seemed to follow me home. And
Right.
well, you know, I learned to pray early on and to ask for protection. I still do
Right.
that, you know. I mean, and I feel very, very comfortable with the phenomenon. I feel like,
Mhm.
you know, the stuff that happens around me now, and I experience synchronicities is probably the main thing. The way that I feel like my entities communicate with me are through these meaningful coincidences. If they don't
And
happen, I
boy,
wonder what's
we
going
had a
wrong,
big
you
one of
know.
those, didn't
But I
we,
didn't
Earl?
really.
I was going to say we had a big,
But
we
you
had
know,
a big
I
synchronicity.
which one was that? Just
At Contact in the Desert, when we were on the panel together.
oh
At
my
Contact in the
gosh, we
Desert.
did. Oh, I know.
Right.
Yeah, and we could talk about that.
Right.
Yes, I mean, just to, you know, long story short, I was telling the story. Dan Harari had me on this panel, kind of at the last minute. That one of his speakers tapped out. It's like, Earl, I need you on my panel. So I went in there and he said, the 3-minute version of your mom's story, please. And so I talked about my mom working for Howard Hughes and how they sent her out to this remote site in the desert where there was an elevator and the doors opened up and there was a little city down there. My mom worked in a military dump. This was back in 1953 to 1958 when I was born. So I'm talking about this, and I'm talking about the elevator and the bunker and all that in the middle of nowhere and Howard Hughes connection. And Katie, she said that she felt tempted to run up to me on stage. She was up there too. She was on the same panel.
Yeah, I was on the panel at the other end.
We may have found the bunker.
I'm like, I think I know where
that was a
bunker
big
is,
synchronicity.
Yeah.
And
the
this is
reason
how
being
it works
is
for me. You
right,
know?
yeah, me too. Synchronicities and signs is
now
a
other
big thing,
people
and
will
I
have
like you have
ETs
that
like
too.
land. Yeah, they'll have, you know, ETs come into their room at a regular basis, which I think, I don't know, I would probably have a lot more wrinkles on my forehead if that was their mode of you know. I've had one face to face with them, and that was kind of, they were the little gray guys, and that was enough for me. You know,
Yeah.
and that happened 9 years ago. I much prefer the synchronicity, and it seems like magic, and it's kind of beautiful. It's almost like this, you know, like the universe is doing beat poetry or something. I really appreciate that form of communication. So but that's kind of how they communicate with me. But I have not experienced the shadow people and all that stuff, although I know people that do, you know. Sometimes people you would never guess, very scientific folks. And I think perhaps our visitors are trying to expand our idea of what reality really is. You know, we talk about the normal and the paranormal, and I think that rather than paranormal, that we should just expand what normal means, because quantum physics tells us everything in the universe is connected, that what a subatomic particle does here in my thumb, you know, that it's got its twin that may be in the Andromeda galaxy or further away, and it affects it. We're somehow connected, you know, and that sounds like magic. That sounds like the paranormal to me. But you know what? It's actually normal.
Yeah. Spooky action at a distance. And there's definitely something to that for sure. Yes. And as far as the shadow beings go, what's interesting, you know, skinwalkers at the Pentagon talk about, even with NIDS, and they would have the guys out there investigating at Skinwalker Ranch. And on the East Coast, their wives that don't even visit the ranch would experience the hitchhiker phenomenon. So that's fascinating too. Like, why is it connecting to the wives, and why is it following the phenomenon following them home. It seems to be like, it doesn't matter where you are. And that's been true in my life, so much so I don't talk about it too often because people might think, man, but it seems like wherever you go, that it's that piece of like, maybe there's something in the brain. We're all like, electric, right? So maybe when you disassociation, maybe when you disassociate, something there gets connected, and wherever you go, you still have, it's like dialing into a radio station or something. You're on that right channel, that right band, and there it is. And so it doesn't matter where you are in the universe, actually, right? So, and you just have that tuned in.
Even Lou Elizondo in his book Imminent, and when we think of Lou Elizondo, I think more of nuts and bolts and stuff like that. But he talked about when he started investigating this stuff, that it came home with him, that they started seeing these orbs or plasma balls. I know that you've had some experience with that sort of phenomena. Do you want to talk about that, or you were talking about the scariest night?
Well, let's talk about the scariest night. So the scariest night on the ranch, it was the boys' mother's birthday. So my sister, my mom, and I, it's interesting. So my mom was dating, I could say his name now because he passed away. His name was Jack, and his wife, Betty, they were separated, getting a divorce. And Betty was dating another gentleman, John. All the adults now in the situation have passed away. So, even though they were separating and getting a divorce, which, by the way, they never ended up getting a divorce, which is another interesting clue to what I think might have been also going on out there. But we would have like Thanksgiving together, and we would go celebrate the boy's mother's birthday. So even though there was a separation, we were all kind of cordial and hung out. So it was the boys' mother's birthday. It was late at night. The adults were playing board games. The three boys, my sister and I, were hanging in the back bedroom. I was the youngest of the kids. So I'm like, oh, these teenagers are so cool, right? And at the time, the hum started. And when that hum started, it seemed like something on the ranch was going to happen, whether it was cryptid in nature, orb in nature, UFOs, these weird ETs that were spotted there, these weird boxes. So all this stuff was going on. So everybody's on edge. So at that moment, the hum, then all the power goes out. Okay. When the power goes out, everybody's freaking out, like flashlights, what's going on at that very moment. And my sister and I remember this like it was yesterday. It was this weird disembodied electrical sounding voice. And basically what's really, I have, if Bill can bring it up, from the briefing document quoted from that night, attention. No, it's not that one. Attention. Yeah, that one. We have allowed you to remain. We have interfered with your lives very little.
Yeah, there
Do
you
not
go.
Cause us to take action, which you will regret. Your friends will be instructed to remain silent concerning us. And I have to tell you, my mother and Jack took that threat and that warning very seriously. And so like I would go try, I'm 9, 10, 11 years old, and I'm trying to tell my best friends about all this weird stuff. They thought I was nuts. So I learned very quickly to keep quiet about that. And when you have your mom and Jack saying, look, there's police involved, we're hearing about the mutilations, like we didn't talk about it. My sister didn't talk about it. So to see that quote, and I tried to recreate that. Like if you ever see a presentation, I recreate that electrical sounding voice. Now in doing research, because another question I talked about, was the military out there doing experiments? And I learned about something called plasma ball technology. And if they were experimenting with plasma ball technologies, that's where they can pipe. It sounds electrical sounding voices out. So if you're, let's say, old fashioned wars, I mean, wars would be fought very differently now, but they can pipe a voice out and direct the warfare somewhere else and keep our troops safe. They're going to use that technology. Were they experimenting with plasma ball technology out there? Were they experimenting with lasers, etc.? We do know in the reports that I've uncovered that the one document that Bill just put up there, if we can bring that up again, in Dr. Leo Sprinkle's files, they talk about Warren. His last name was redacted out, from Camp Carson. He visits the ranch. First of all, why is there a soldier from Camp Carson on the ranch property? Felt something wrong. He wouldn't felt sober, wouldn't go into the woods. Something took over his mind, made him walk towards the woods, would release him, and he would run back. And this did this to him 5 times. So there were these strange, mysterious boxes seen out there. I experienced one of those in the daytime. Me and the youngest son and Jack were in the pickup truck, and we were going through the Ponderosa Pines in the back of the ranch house in the middle of the daytime. You know, we're getting something from the outbuilding. We had the dogs in the truck with us. Jack pulls over the truck. We hear what sounded like electrical, like bees, like a zzz, like a thing. And we look over, and the tree line off the ground, about 3.5, 4 feet off the ground, is this strange box. Seemed like it was illuminated inside. Jack's yelling at us, "Get in the truck, get in the truck. It's the box. It's a box. It's a box." We jump in the truck. I look back, and the box was gone. God. And this is not the only encounter with box.
Wow.
Carl Higdon had a box. There's, Trey Hudson down south had encounters with these strange boxes. So yeah, here's a map. I mean, where that red star is where the ranch property sits. And look at all the military bases out there, Shrivner, Cheyenne Mountain, Fort Carson, NORAD Air Force. You're
concentric to all. It's like surrounding you.
Right. And then up through the Black Forest up there in the late 70s, the Air Force had a lot more property that ran into Elbert County. So again, we had this report right here. I have original copy of it. The choppers and the choppers, these marked out helicopters that were going out. There's a whole report where they did a big deep dive on this topic, but they were seen flying off and on properties out there in Elbert County. Some people would claim they were silent. One of the people I interviewed that pioneered that land for generations, she was coming home from a 4-H meeting at night. She had her permit, but did not have her driver's license. And they saw a big light. She said it was brighter than the sun on the ground. They saw a platform on the side of it. It was silent. The mom pulled over the car. It was her and a couple friends. The mom was so scared and so freaked out. My witness had to drive home, and she was terrified. This is at night. She didn't have her license. Her mom's freaking out, but the thing just vanished. It was not a helicopter. So we had both these blacked out helicopters, and there were articles about these helicopters like menacing and chasing people, young kids and stuff. And when I saw Richard Doty at a conference in Laughlin, I wanted to ask him 2 questions. I asked him, number one, were you aware of the Rocky Mountain Ranch property in the 70s? Because Richard Doty came in, I believe, in 77. So it would have been in the middle of this kind of stuff. And he said, yes, he was aware of the property. So that's interesting. Why were you aware of it? And right. And I said,
what's Air up Force with these- OSI.
Right. And what's going on with these blacked out helicopters? And he said, oh, well, they were a diversion. So, look over here why we're doing this over there. This is another interesting note from Dr. Leo Sprinkle's files. It's of the Bill Waugh, the undersheriff. We had George Yarnell was a sheriff. This is Bill Waugh. This is a note. He said, Bill Waugh, the undersheriff, wants to talk to someone, has seen ships going into the ground, boxes, mutilations being done. Nobody will talk. They don't want an investigation because of the publicity. They don't want the stigma. Their credentials were an important factor. John would go back. That's John from our ranch, the mother's boyfriend. NORAD colonel said bluntly to forget about it and to shut up. And the Air Force head has a directive to handle UFOs and Bigfoot. So we had these reports of these white fuzzies. My mom called them white fuzzies because they were these gray Sasquatch, and they were like this grayish white. And I think they were connected possibly to the boxes. They were connected to the ships for sure. I mean, I don't know if they're bodyguards or if they had anything to do with the mutilations. I mean, cattle are quite large. So that's that whole other cryptid piece to it. We had reports of these strange birds like phoenixes, pterodactyls type things. Like thunderbirds, like thunderbirds, and even MUFON got reports of these just recently. Sean Bartok, who owned property out, in Franktown, had these same types of encounters, same types of activities. So what's with that? We had these platypus-looking creatures. Wow. Weird stuff like that, like interdimensional type of stuff. Like, where are they coming from? Really, really bizarre.
Why they call it high strangeness. And what I find so interesting is that, and as you know, and I know, when you start talking about pterodactyls and things like that,
Yeah.
the folks that are like claiming to adhere to science, you know, and the scientific method, you know, there's the eye rolling and the raised eyebrows. But I'm sorry, a UFO sighting, all you need is one, okay, to just uproot the whole idea that we're all alone out here and that there's nothing else out there, that we're the crown of creation. Honest to God, it does not raise an eyebrow for me at all. You know, Skinwalker, they saw something that looked like a giant beaver, like a prehistoric, you know, and of course the Skinwalker itself, the dire wolf, you know, it's been extinct for how many, you know, million years, but I've gotten to the point now where if there isn't some element of absurdity in a good case, it causes me to question whether it's a good case or not. It seems almost like the signature to me that it seems to me almost like this phenomenon is making fun of our idea of how limited science is and how we put everything in this little neat box. We were talking about this earlier, about how people want this little box with a bow on top. And that's not the way that life works. It's not the way that science works either, you know.
That's true.
The UFO phenomenon, you know, paranormal, you know, I would, again, you know, I want to get rid of the little, you know, the para bit. I think that we need to expand our idea of what normal is. We don't live in a Newtonian universe. We live in a quantum universe. Things like consciousness and high strangeness. Well, that is the norm. Yeah, that is the norm. So, but, you know, we just love to limit ourselves, you know. You've got your Neil deGrasse Tysons who, you know, constantly, even with all the evidence that we have now and things like the Tic Tac and Go Fast and Gimbal, et cetera, and Bob Solis coming forward with his, you know, the ICBM shutdown and incursion on the Malmstrom base, and David Schindler, who had the exact same thing happen, you know, 6 months apart, but the same exact incident. Well, this is the way that the phenomenon works, and it is weird as hell, so strange. And it's not, you know, not little lights in the sky that are distant from us. It affects us personally. It's a personal phenomenon.
Right.
And
there's a great book.
You know, you've realized this. I've realized this.
Yeah. There's a great book called Mystery Stalks the Prairie, and they talk about Malmstrom. And even, you know, I hope I don't get in trouble for saying this, but when we were filming for Beyond Skinwalker, we were putting the drones up and it would come back, the GPS, and read as if we were at Malmstrom. Like, how does that happen? But in Mystery Stalks the Prairie and talking with Bob Solis in the 70s, in 1977, they were seeing these same almost identical drawing sketches of these Sasquatch creatures at Malmstrom in Elbert County. They look identical. They were giving airmen polygraph tests because they were having so many sightings and encounters with not only the Sasquatch creatures, but with UFO sightings and orbs, so much so that they're administrating these lie detector tests for these airmen. And I mean, the similarities between what was happening at Malmstrom and in Elbert County, what is all that and how does that all tie together? That's another question. I don't know how we are on time, but one thing I don't want to leave out of this is, for me, one of the great mysteries was this November 11th, 1975 event where in Dr. Leo Sprinkle's files and elsewhere, there was a claim that two jets were scrambled after, right here, two Air Guard pilots were scrambled in pursuit of a UFO at night. So I did a dig on this. I found the article, and two A-7Ds were scrambled after an unknown something on radar, and they ended up crashing. Both pilots survived. I FOIA'd the incident report. I got it back, and it was very interesting. Of course, there was a lot of redactions out of it, but what I came to find later, here's where they're talking about one of the aircrafts, the instructor's aircraft, 8 of his instrumentation lights were inoperative during this encounter. They mentioned seeing another craft, but they never mentioned what type of craft. There were 18 live rounds of ammunition on board. So it's all very mysterious. And of course, when it gets really interesting and juicy, there's what was, on board flying over residential neighborhoods in pursuit of a UFO. Goodness. But on that very same day, November 11th, 1975, we had the Falcon Bridge incident, or Selfridge, Michigan. They scrambled 2 F-106 Delta Darts after something over the Great Lakes over Michigan. They were watching numerous UAPs on radar for several hours. It was witnessed by police officers on the ground. Many airmen and women there were watching these things, so they decided to scramble. I think it was traveling 35 nautical miles over the Great Lakes, going from 26,000 feet up to 74,000 feet, just straight up. So they scrambled these F-106 Delta Darts. But then talking with Travis Walton about this, because what I also learned happened on November 11th, 1975, right after midnight, Travis Walton was returned to Snowflake, Arizona on November 11th, 1975. So here we have scrambled jets in Elbert County, scrambled jets out of Ontario, right, and over Falcon Bridge and Selfridge. And then what else? So Travis goes, Katie, do you know what else happened on November 11th, 1975? And I'm like, no, what? I mean, there's 3 big things. He said the Edmund Fitzgerald went down and 29 men went missing over the Great Lakes of Michigan. So all 4 of these events occurred November 11th, 1975. It's mind blowing. Wow. So again, I love saying this because people will sometimes ask, like, all these happened, 50 plus years ago. Why are you still digging? Why are you still going to archives? Why are you still investigating the Snippy the horse case? Because like you said, there was that great mystery, and it's of no fault. It's not Linda Moulton Howe's fault. It's not Chuck O'Brien's fault. The original APRO reports went missing for 35 plus years. So, tales, it's like the telephone game, right? You get parroted, it gets repeated, and sometimes it's not correct. Right. It's nobody's fault. I'm not pointing fingers like, oh, you are wrong. It's just what we had to work with. But I'm sorry, I had a phone call there. But now, all these years later, we can go back and go to the beginning of the story and get the photographs and get it right, So, but
fabulous.
Yeah.
I think we're going to be taking a break in a minute or two.
Okay.
And then we'll come back, and I think this is a pretty good spot. And I would like to hear more about Snippy the horse, actually, since you brought up Snippy.
Right. Yeah, so, I can try. Now would be a good time to talk about that. Just kind of little teasers. I will be presenting all the new data and photos and just new discovered information we have about Snippy the horse at Contact in the Desert this year. And I'm so excited to do that. We've been working with the King family, and I'm just, this is sort of just unbelievable things that are coming forward with this, connections even to the Lonnie Zamora case from Socorro, which occurred just a year before, 2 years before. And so, fabulous. A lot of new interesting information coming out about that. And it's never too late to just go back and dig some of these historic cases, because new information is coming forward, and we know more now than we did then, about things. I mean, even with the mutilations, in the day it was like, oh, these are just satanic cults or whatever. Well, no, maybe 1 or 2% perhaps, but certainly it doesn't answer for all of it. So, it's just a fascinating thing to just keep digging on. And go to the original source material, as Dave Marler likes to say, is the original source material. And it's so cool now. Anybody can go to Rio Rancho And if you're interested in the topic, it's like a destination place to go visit. And I highly recommended visiting that National UFO Historical Records Center out there in Rio Rancho.
Really
you have to go to the
there.
website. Yeah, you have to go to the website and make an appointment. But it's really worth it. I recommend anybody doing that if you're interested in the topic, for sure.
Fantastic. I see this phenomena, it's a continuum, and there's no such thing as irrelevant information because it happened 50, 60 years
That's
ago,
right.
because it's ongoing and it's all part of what's happening now. And it's not like something started and ended and started up again or something. No, this is all connected. So when I get like a historical case, some people like look down on those cases, but most people aren't comfortable talking about a UFO incident or something that has astounded them right after it happens. I was encouraged to not talk about what happened to me personally.
Me too.
So all this matters. It's a continuum, and there's no such thing as a case not being important because it's old. Heck no.
That's right.
It's part of what's happening now. It's all connected.
That's right. Yeah.
Well, I think
And I
we're
know
on the hour, and we'll go into our station break now, Bill, I believe, and we will see you guys on the other side of that. Yeah, you know, I normally Bill, my producer here, lets me know when we're ready to go to a break, and I, for some reason, I had the wrong text screen up, so I didn't see. Yeah, we went over there, so I hope it didn't mess timing up. But anyhow, so back to Snippy the horse. Now let's talk about that, and then I want to talk about your work at Mount Wilson Ranch, which affects me personally.
Okay. So Snippy the horse is an event that occurred it was the second biggest news story in 1967. So this occurred September,
yes,
right? 1967. And this poor horse, and there was some controversy whether, the name of the horse was Lady or Snippy, but I can, let me get these off my ear because they're so good, noise canceling. But we have original photos and original sources, and his birthday and where he was where he was born and all that stuff. But I have pictures of him now, the only two in existence, and I was so excited to share with the King family. But little Snippy as a colt, he was a male gelding, and he was Snippy, and we have pictures of him with his beautiful mother, Lady. And there were 4 horses. So there's so much information. And like I said, I get to share so many original documents and the lineage of the horse and so much more information that really hasn't really been known, because what often happens, just like when a video goes viral now on the internet, you got a viral video. Everybody hopes for a viral video. That happened with the newspapers back in 1967. And so there's so many different headlines. And that's something I've been doing recently, is going to the national records for all the historical newspapers. And I'm pulling all these headlines from 1967. And even though the headlines are different, the content is basically the same. And so you'll get tiny little changes that'll occur. Right. And it's like we talked about the telephone game that happens, and then our memories lapse, or you don't have photographs to help with your memories. I love photographs. It helps with the memory sometimes. But and sometimes misinformation, not of anybody's fault, gets echoed and echoed and echoed until we have a big mess. Even the King family themselves talking with Grandpa Bob and the descendants of the family. And even for me with the ranch, that's why getting these documents that were reported back in the 70s was so important for me, because it helps fill in those holes. And where our own memories, we tend to, all our memories are a little faulty, and so, that happens. So to find actual photographs and to find the original materials and all that, I can't wait to share all that. It's just fantastic. But I can at least say on this show here that Snippy is Snippy. And so that's at least one mystery solved.
Wow. Because that's been even the name of the horse, people were saying that wasn't the right name. And it's kind of ironic because it was a mutilation and snip, snip, snip.
Yeah, and
it
it's
seemed a
not.
little too
Right.
convenient of a name for the horse, but
Right.
sometimes life imitates art and vice versa,
Yeah, it's
It's
a good
so
story,
very
but that,
interesting.
yeah. But Snippy was Snippy not because of snip, snip, snip.
Yeah, yeah.
So,
And
yeah.
so now I kind of I sort of wanted to go and land on your work over at Mount Wilson Ranch, which now we talked a little bit about this, about the synchronicity that we had on stage at Contact in the Desert.
Right.
In some ways, I kind of wish that you had run over to my side and just shaken me on stage and said, oh my God. but why don't you talk a little bit about Mount Wilson Ranch, who owned it, who but maybe before you do that, let me, just for those who may not know my mom's story, this is my mom. Her name was Betty Maiden. That was her maiden name. You can imagine how Social Security office loves what's your mother's maiden name? Maiden. It's sort of like the old Who's on First, Abbott and Costello riff. But anyhow, my mom had she I think what worked out for her was that she had an early age job in law enforcement. She was in Muscatine, Iowa, is where she grew up, Midwest, and she they needed somebody to take care of the drunk tank on weekends. And everybody loved my mom. They all knew my mom. And my grandfather, he was the broom maker in Muscatine, Iowa. He made these beautiful handmade brooms. There's still a few that are in existence. I think my cousin got the one that I wanted. But anyhow, my mom, somehow or another, they deputized my mom so that she could take care of the drunk tank on weekends. She was a young adult.
What is a drunk tank?
What is a drunk? 18 years old.
What is a drunk tank?
The drunk tank. It would be where they would put the people that were arrested in the jail. If for being drunk in public, then they would put you in the drunk tank for the weekend, let you out, and then they would let you out on Mondays. And they needed somebody to watch these guys and to give them their meals and to be there in case there was an emergency or something.
Got it.
So now my mom, she moved here to Southern California back in the early 1950s. And she got a job working as a secretary for Howard Hughes at Hughes Aircraft. And we all knew this. It was not weird information, right? Everybody knew about my mom's former employer and what my mom did. And she was kind of proud about it. Yes, I worked for Howard Hughes. Her best friend was Ellen Severson. We called her Aunt Ellen, and she worked for the Rand Corporation, which was a subsidiary of Hughes. Now, I had a very strange the picture up of me climbing up the swing set, if you want. Nobody told me to do this. I don't know how I knew to do this. This is Venice, California, about 1962. I was 4 years old, approximately there. And every morning I would climb up to the top of the monkey bars and I would wave and I would sing at the sky. So I was doing this for maybe a week or so. And I will never forget. My mom opened up the kitchen window and she yells, "Earl, who are you waving and singing to?" And it wasn't even a question for me. My answer was, "I'm waving and I'm singing to the space people. It's the space people, Mom." Now, I don't know where this came from, but I was obsessed from birth with outer space and obsessed with the idea of there being life in the universe other than our sorry butts, you know? And I think that my mom took note of this little ritual that I did. So 1963, it was maybe a year after I started doing this, and I was still doing it. You know, I would climb up there every day, you know, and wave and sing to the space people. She sat me down for breakfast, and she was sitting across from my cornflakes. I was getting ready to go to my kindergarten class, and my mom told me this crazy story about how when she worked for Howard Hughes, she had a very strange element to her job. And she said that they took her out to the middle of nowhere, the Great American Desert. That was the quote, the Great American Desert. There was nothing out there except for a bunker, a concrete shack. She said that it was just me and a little security detail. They unlocked this thing, and I wondered if they were going to show me a tractor or tools. But no, there was an elevator in this bunker. My mom got into the elevator. They didn't tell her where she was going. She said that maybe a floor or two, but this thing kept moving, and it moved at a clip. And she felt butterflies in her stomach, was how she, you know, described it to a 5-year-old. She said, I was scared. But the doors opened, and there was a little city under the desert. She said, a bustling little city. We got around in golf carts. There were German rocket scientists that worked here. She said that we were working on very, very highly top secret projects. And she told me a few other things. And, you know, you guys out there, you can Google me. And, you know, I've told this story on a million other podcasts for other people. I don't know if I've talked about it much on my own podcast. But the way she ended this conversation was she said, well, son, you go out there and you wave and you sing to the space people. And I want you to know that there are space people, that we have already made contact, that we are not alone in the universe. And you're going to hear about UFOs and stuff like that. And it's really true. Later on, you know, she said that Star Wars wasn't far-fetched, that, you know, the craft and the different beings and all that, it's really like that. But she doubled down, you know, the 1977, so it was 14 years later, I guess, something like that. She said they're never going to tell the public because they're afraid of how people will react. There's my mom and myself. That was 1963. That was probably right around when my mom had this conversation with me that has set the course of my life. There's a glamour shot of my mom. That would have been right around 1952, 53, when she was working for Hughes. And there's the last photograph of my mom. She passed away a week later. That's me, younger me with brown hair and a little thinner back then. But my mom, you know, she wound up working for the aerospace industry up until the day she died. She worked as a corporate headhunter, and she would get scientists out to Lockheed. Look, I even have my Lockheed Plant 42 Palmdale Cup. One of my field investigators found that for me in a used Goodwill shop for 50 cents. I know. I don't know that they let the public into. I don't know if they have a visitor center or anything, but I do have the cup. I don't work there. Tell us about the black triangles, Lockheed. Anyway. I don't think all the black triangles are ours, by the way. I think that we're copycatting them, maybe. Dave Marler and I had that conversation once. And back when I thought that they were all ours. But no, I think that we're probably copying something that we've witnessed or maybe were shown. I don't know. But anyway, my mom's story, this followed me all my life. And when my mom passed away, I realized I wasn't going to get more information from her. I never did get the details. And that's what set the course for me becoming a field investigator. Now, let's talk about Mount Wilson Ranch and your research there and what you have found and how that coincides with my mom's story.
First, I want to ask you, do you remember do you remember the song that you sang to the ETs, your space people? Do you remember the song you used to sing to the... I said, do you remember the song that you used to sing to the space people when you were little?
Oh, I just think that I was riffing. I think it was just like, hello, space people, you know, good morning, space people, you know, something like that.
Go
I don't
to
think I
school
had
today.
a written song, really. It was just...
row, row, row.
I'll tell you, I had one situation where an experiencer was having a bad time and they were going through something. And this happened just maybe a year ago. And I started singing to them on the phone to break through their fear. They didn't expect it at all. And boom, there it was. So, you know, here I am, you know, it's all these years later, you know, 61 years after the event. I'm still waving and singing to the space people, you know.
Right. You know, there's something to that.
My life.
Right. So many people in this field.
Anyway,
like,
Mount Wilson Ranch.
Yeah,
Who
I was
owned
going to say
Mount
so many.
Wilson Ranch back in the 1950s?
Yeah, well, Howard Hughes and Bob Bigelow owned Mount Wilson Ranch and Skinwalker Ranch at the same time, which just kind of came to light. But as talking about synchronicities, as Synchronicity has it, as we're sitting up on that panel, I had recently had a visit to Mount Wilson Ranch and got to meet Jeff McBurney, the owner of Mount Wilson Ranch now, and his beautiful wife, Nick Knack. And we hung out and, you know, because we did the Beyond Skinwalker together. So I wanted to meet, you know, these other locations. And at the time, my wall downstairs, you know, had all the aviary group on there because I want to know, like, and going through Dr. Leo Sprinkle's folders too, like.
Well, that was interesting. You know, we record this on a particularly good platform that we use for our podcasts, and it shut down. We were all just kicked out of our own StreamYard room. Go figure. I'm not one to go and for a ufologist, I don't race after every conspiracy theory out there, but it felt to me like we were touching on some interesting subjects and we were just shut out of our own podcast. So I'm going to ask this for shut on us. So Katie, you've done a deep dive on the Mount Wilson Ranch. And maybe you could go and talk about the people that have owned that ranch over the years, which, you know, I'll let you reiterate what you were saying. And let's talk about how it corresponds to my mom's story.
Yeah, for sure.
All yours, my dear.
If we can get it
out
there.
Vape. I'm upset. Like... I usually don't vape on air, but that really, it made me mad and it made me upset.
We could be being messed with here. But as you know, you talked about synchronicities, right? And when we were up at that panel at that time, that, you know, you were talking about your mom and Howard Hughes. I had just recently gotten back from Mount Wilson Ranch and meeting Jeff McBurney and his beautiful wife, Nick Knack, for the first time. And my wall, I actually pulled it out. I had, I don't know if you could see this, but I started looking into the aviary group. Yeah. So I tend to get a little OCD from time to time. So I was like, I had things labeled by like person and doing deep dives on the people that were connected, right? From Bob Bigelow owning Mount Wilson Ranch and the Skinwalker Ranch at the same time. Yeah. We have John Alexander, Scott Jones. I can go through some of these names. Bob Collins.
Such a good guy.
Put off, Jacques Vallée, Linda Howe, Dr. Sprinkle, William Moore, Bruce Maccabee, on and on and on, Christopher Kit Green, and, you know, on and on. Like Doty, right? What are they all doing at the Skinwalker Ranch and at Mount Wilson?
Doty.
Yeah.
Right? I like Doty, actually, but he freaks me out a little bit.
I'm trying, it was like a crime scene on my wall. I had like string going.
Well, there you go.
Anyway, So I'm trying to figure out, like, what is the motive? What are they trying to learn? I know there was remote viewing, just all this. How does it tie into, the Rocky Mountain Ranch and everything like that? So in meeting Jeff and getting the tour, because we both did Beyond Skinwalker together, and he's given me a tour of the location, and he's showing me where the strange power pole just ends in this concrete area where they're digging, and they pull out these ornate, they look like something you would see in France or in Italy, just beautiful concrete sculpted like lamppost kind of things with sconces.
She called it a city under the desert. City under the desert.
Right. So I had just seen these things, and and Mount Wilson is not very far from Area 51. We know about the Howard Hughes runway right there by Mount Wilson Ranch. Quite literally, if you ran from the Howard Hughes runway, it just goes right into the Mount Wilson Ranch and these bunkers underground. And, they're starting to dig there as well. So I had just had this fresh in my mind, and seeing these ornate lampposts from underground at Mount Wilson, knowing of the Howard Hughes connection. And I hear you over there talking about your mother working and going down this elevator shaft. And I'm under the table on the panel going, ooh, ooh, pick me, pick me, pick me. I know where it is. Mount Wilson. So that happened. And now I've been out there a couple times. I can't wait to get out there again this spring and summer.
I'm going to go. I'm going. I'm doing it.
You've got to get out there because it's your family history now. But so many weird things.
Bringing a camera person and doing it.
Right.
Yeah.
What's fascinating too, I mean, so Jeff takes us to this cave and you guys need to hike up there when you go there. But Jeff talks about in the back of the cave, he's standing there and his whole body vibrated as if there was like a maglev running underground there, maybe from Area 51 to who knows where. Could be even NORAD in Colorado Springs, the Pentagon, Colorado Springs. I mean, how many tunnels and things underground do we have here in the United States that nobody is aware of? And maybe
my mom's story is from the early 50s. Okay, it's from the best of my knowledge, she was working for Hughes underground, like from 1953 until 1958 when I was born. She may have gone back after I was born. I mean, it's not like, she kept her security clearances till the day she died. She was very proud of them. So she may have been back, but she called it a little city under the desert. She mentioned people like Werner von Braun was working with her. Yeah.
And didn't she mention there was even a
it's my friend Werner,
Right. Didn't she even mention like there was a hair salon down there? I mean,
no, she had a barber shop, and she said that the guy could perm my hair for me. She said we had a bowling alley, we had a movie theater, and there was a barber shop, but the barber knew how to do my hair. And I didn't think anything of that when I was 5 years old. But as I got older, I'm thinking, well, she spent some time down there. If she had to have her hair done, it's not like you go a mile under the desert for a hair appointment, So she was very active in this early on.
Right. And you think about Howard Hughes and his later life. They're talking with Jeff. Now, this is a big rumor, so don't shoot the messenger here. But
don't tell anybody.
There's some questions about, who, if you pull up a picture of Bob Bigelow and Howard Hughes. Just, I don't know. It's interesting.
There's a little resemblance there.
There's a little resemblance there. It's an interesting theory. And you also think of Howard Hughes later in his years. I mean, what did he see? What did he encounter? There's also the hitchhiker effect happening out there at, Mount Wilson Ranch, but that maglev. So we're in that cave and you kick the wall of the cave and it sounds hollow. It sounds hollow underground. Now, is it just a big open cavern? I don't know. I think there's much more behind the Mount Wilson Ranch and what all these what I call players are out there doing. What are the secrets that are being kept there? What are they back engineering? We all know that, like you mentioned, Lockheed Martin and Northrop Grumman and General Electric and so many others, there's a whole list of them, Raytheon and whatnot, yeah. They're holding a lot of these secrets, and they're compartmentalized, and one's not talking to the other. And, if this, to me, that's why the lid is kept on these things, because people that have been hurt and killed, and let's say a certain, let's say Lockheed has access to something that General Electric does not. Could there be lawsuits? And could there be, in order for a true disclosure to happen, you would have to have protections in place for, people that have been affected or victims of certain things, that would protect, lawsuits from occurring in like the whistleblower protections that are put in place that to me are a little flimsy at best, so people are still scared to talk about these things.
She was afraid to, she was still working as a, corporate headhunter for Lockheed. David Grush's litany of the gatekeepers of this information, those were all my mom's old accounts. Northrop. I had one friend that my mom sent out to Northrop that helped bring their mainframe computer back online. He was a math whiz. His mom was my math teacher in grammar school. Maybe she might have heard me, give my little talk about, I told my mom's story in front of my 4th grade class, for God's sakes. And that was a whole other brouhaha, that's when I got the lecture from my mom, how did you remember that? And oh my God, you can't ever talk about that again. I could go to prison. Those are national secrets. I had a guy from the DOD that I talk with every now and then. And he told me, I've seen your mother's file. And we knew about you. You went and you gave a little lecture to your class when you were 10 years old, didn't you? We were well aware of that. Your mom reported on herself because she was afraid that it would get back to them, from some other channel. So, it's very strange how, and this is an occurrence from the early 1950s. What made Howard Hughes go insane? Maybe he was having these shadow figures following
That's
him.
what I wonder. Yeah.
Yeah.
He
pushed him over the edge.
Right. He owned all of that pioche, which is right there. And so, there's definitely so much more that needs to be uncovered about Howard Hughes and the secrets he kept. And in fact, that's on my bucket list of to-dos, is to go down. I went through the National Archives for the Eisenhower files, because that's a whole other case that I've been working on, is this, General Arthur Exxon. There was rumored that one of the Roswell bodies ended up in a mortuary outfit in Denver. And I'm set to go speak with Timothy Hogan, who, is Grand Poobah there of the Knights Templar here in Colorado. And he was neighbors to Mamie Eisenhower. So there's definitely this Eisenhower, Colorado, Fitzsimmons, Lowry, Mason Lodge connected to a possible Roswell body. So I'm still on that. But looking at the archives of the Eisenhowers, there are several boxes on Howard Hughes. So that's something I want to just kind of go dig through and see if I could find any clues to the area of Mount Wilson Ranch. And I would, of course, share that with you immediately if I find that.
Thank you. You got my attention here, Katie.
Yeah, we for sure know he had a runway out there, and there's definitely something
the air
buried
sock
underground
is still there, right?
The air sock is still there, and you can just see, if you even just anybody listening to this podcast, go Google Mount Wilson Ranch, and you'll see the runway there is still very visible to this day, and you can see how the road kind of curves right into Mount Wilson Ranch. But certainly things underground. And one of the cool, interesting experiences, we're hiking there, there's snow on the ground, and we get up to this, it's almost as if there was some sort of ceremony or something, but just like in Beyond Skinwalker that happened when we were filming that first night of the snowstorm. We're walking with the camera crew, and there's this blanket of snow, and out comes these bipedal one in front of the other, footprints that walk for a short distance, then disappeared for a while, and then walk again, and then disappeared, as if something's coming out from underground. When we're on Mount Wilson Ranch, that happened there. We're walking and there's these strange prints. There's on the Rocky Mountain Ranch website, there's an episode about the Mount Wilson Ranch where I'm interviewing both you, Earl, and Jeff McBurney. And we show those pictures of those prints that we found at Mount Wilson Ranch. And we kick the cave so you can hear how it sounds hollow under there. So there's definitely a connection. They were definitely out there looking both at Skinwalker and Mount Wilson Ranch for a reason. What are they hiding? Is it back engineer technology, aircraft? Is this stuff going to, Lockheed and Northern Grumman and all this, and General Electric and so on and so forth? So it's a whole other piece of the puzzle, that gets away from high strangeness. But again, high strangeness, you can't not connect that too, because that's occurring also. So
it's a continuum, and people don't realize that.
Right.
It's like when keep going.
I was gonna say it was something personal that happened that I've never shared before publicly. So at Mount Wilson Ranch, they have, the rooms where people can stay, but they have this main kind of lodge where there's the big fireplace and people can go and have breakfast and do crafts or whatever. And so, and the old bar is there with, it's gorgeous. Anyway, so it's kind of where you go hang out, right? The saloon. And there's a restroom there. And I'm in the restroom, and it's like concrete walls. It's an orange owl. On the back of the toilet seat is an owl, and the wallpaper is very familiar, and the floor is familiar. This is familiar, and it's very familiar to me. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I know this place. I know this place. So I go out to Jeff, and I'm like, I have a question for you. Has this changed decor since the 70s? And he's like, no, it's the same. Wow. I said, did this used to be a Girl Scout camp? Because I was always sent away to Girl Scout camp for 2 weeks every summer. And he said, yes, it was a Mormon Girl Scout camp. And I'm like, I know this wallpaper. I know this toilet. I know this bathroom. I remember the carpet. I remember making yarn things with popsicle sticks and little popsicle stick cabins.
Us boys did that too. Yeah.
At Mount Wilson Ranch.
My God.
So I think I was there when I was a kid at Girl Scout camp. Because
we went to Catalina Island. That was where the YMCA cowboys. That was what I belonged to. I was a Boy Scout for maybe 2 months, and then I discovered rock and roll guitar, and that was that. But
ruined.
But we went to Catalina Island all the time, and it's funny how that plays into the phenomenon. Half of my good offshore cases are like right there where we were camping out.
Right.
Although I don't have any memories of paranormal stuff happening there, but my dad sure opened up talking with me. It was a father-son camping trip, but how interesting, and how synchronicity plays in our lives. And again, Katie, for you and for myself, this is personal as it gets. I'm looking for my mom. I'm not just looking for ET. I'm not just looking for the answer to the flying saucer, situation. But this is personal. I'm still looking for my mom. She was able to tell me so much, but there was so much she couldn't tell me. And there was a whole fiasco. She left a legal pad, apparently written in shorthand. That was my mom's thing. She'd write a grocery list. Forget it. You couldn't read it. It was in that secretarial shorthand stuff. And she was, she did stenography for all these high-powered meetings. When I see documents that were released through FOIA requests, I often wonder if that was my mom, my mom that was there, as a stenographer. But she knew a lot. You gotta
wonder, what did she hear? What did your mom know?
Oh, she knew.
Yeah.
She knew, and that was, and she let me know she knew, but she couldn't tell me very much. Just what I got from her is Star Wars is not far-fetched. All the beings, there's that multiplicity of various beings that are out there. And she said that it's realer than you will ever know. And that, just kind of dogged me for my whole life. What I heard was what my mom told me. She said, if anything ever happens to me, there's something for you that's in the safe. The combination is under the safe. And I don't want to go and bring up dirty laundry about my family, but one of my family members, after my mom died, went and took that safe when the rest of us were kind of grieving. And I heard that, and I was told later, don't worry, there was nothing of worth in there. There was just like legal pads with mom's, scribbles on them, her shorthand scribbles. And it all went into the trash on Monday because there was just costume jewelry in there and nothing worth anything. And I think to this day, my mom probably told me everything, and it's gone. So now I have to unearth it myself, and unearthing may be exactly what we're doing. Mount Wilson Ranch, there's something underground there. I want to know if that was the place. Yeah. I've had Richard Satter, who's an author who writes specifically about deep underground military bases. And I asked him about Howard Hughes, and he told me that Hughes had the first private contractor lab at Area 51. He wasn't sure if it was above or underground, but he said that was there. And so for a long time, I had the presupposition of perhaps that's where my mom worked out of. But, I don't know. That's just hypothesis. Right. How wonderful if we can actually find the location of that bunker, of that elevator. And I just wish you Godspeed.
I hope Jeff and them continue to dig and continue to search down there. So, and I think he has intentions to do that. He's pretty fearless in that regard. And, he's like, well, you wonder though, the more, perhaps Jeff pushes that, is he going to get a warning or something? He better stop. That could happen. That could happen.
They got that skinwalker now.
Yeah. So, it's certainly, as time goes on and more people are feeling comfortable to talk and connect these dots, more and more information's coming out. But that's always been my belief. Like, forget about the aliens and the craft. Let's talk about the players that are involved in the secrets they're keeping. To me, that's the real disclosure. And when we get too close to knocking down that set of dominoes, we're going to be, shut down or stopped. Or I think a lot's what's happening right now with these hearings, and that we're getting a lot of muddying of the waters, right? And discrediting of people, where they're saying, oh, we're going to protect you and we're going to let you speak. And at the end of the day, they're not living up to that promise, and they're not letting these people speak, and they're shutting them down, and they're discrediting them. And so it's terrible. And then everybody gets fed up and frustrated, just like with these crazy, I don't even want to say the word anymore.
I don't either.
That's happening in New Jersey. You're not laughing.
Yeah. And everybody's focused on that. It's like so stupid. And again, it's they're telling people not to shoot at them. So what does that tell you? Who owns these? If they're saying, oh no, DOD is saying, don't shoot them down. Well, when we had the Chinese spy balloon, that was the first thing they did. They sent fighter planes out to chase it down, and they shot it down, So It's ours. It's our program. And but it's muddying the water because all the ufologists are focused on that instead of the elephant in the room, which we are talking about right now. We're talking about the UFO phenomenon. And of course, it intersects with the paranormal phenomena. I don't tell certain people in my organization, but they are one and the same. It is a continuum. And you just need to expand your idea of what normal is. If you don't like the word paranormal, open your mind up to what normal actually is. It's a lot huger. It's not contained in a little neat, box. unless it's a box that you guys saw that was appearing and disappearing, you know.
Right. Yeah. I mean, to me, that's one of the biggest secrets, right? I mean, we are powerful beings that we can manifest. We're manifestors, each and every one of us.
Yes,
and
we
if
are.
if we all knew our own individual powers to create reality, we'd live in a interesting world. I'm not going to say necessarily better, because it just depends on where you're at. And
Motives,
unfortunately, motives, and we live in a world that can be pretty sick at times, and tough to maneuver. So you put all those powers working together, it would be an interesting what would we end up with? I don't know. I don't know. But
you remember the guy Q
that
in Star Trek that was sort of godlike? Well, that's sort of us. That's our potentiality there, you know. But we just clip our own wings, you know. It's kind of frustrating.
I remember, Earl, were you at the symposium where Lou Elizondo kind of first came out and was talking to the MUFON members as a keynote speaker? And that's where he kind of was quoted as saying, you know, we're going to have a fundamentally different conversation a year from now. And that's when, you know, we had some disruptions within MUFON. And I can remember sitting in that audience, watching and listening to Lou, and getting a sense. And that's kind of where we learned, you know, I was the director of the MUFON Mars project, and kind of learned that, that was kind of set up, and they were working with ATIP and Lou, and they were getting that information, and that all that was kind of being disclosed at the time. And I remember sitting there thinking, you know, maybe the big secret is exactly that. It's bigger than what we think it is. It has to do with consciousness and reality, and how we can kind of, and to me, that explains a lot. I know we won't go down the rabbit hole of a simulated reality or a simulation, but it would answer a lot of questions, wouldn't it? You know?
Yes, it would. Yes, it would.
Yeah,
and you know, my good friend Greg Bishop, he talks about co-creation and how you know, how that fits in with a you know, UFO phenomenon, and he believes that we are part of the manifestation. It's like a dance between us and this other intelligence, and it takes two to tango. And so through those that have this expanded consciousness and understand this, the phenomena is able to manifest. I know, like a PhD, smart guy. I'm not going to mention his name. I don't know if he wants it out there, but he's like a mentor to a lot of the guys at the Stanford Sol conference and such. But he says the same thing, you know, that there's that we actually play into this, and he manifested a black triangle. He was the most shocked of anyone when it happened. He didn't believe that it was happening, but there it was. And, you know, it's the only time he's ever seen a UFO. Before it happened, he questioned whether UFOs even existed. But he was open-minded enough that he had this gift happen for him. So I know that we play into this, and that it's a dance between us and the ineffable. And the sky is no limit. We limit ourselves, though. You know, we limit ourselves.
True. Yeah, that is so
Bill
true.
is telling me we have some photos that are still available. Bill, why don't you bring them up? Oh, there's who's that cute little gal there?
Well, that is moi. That is moi. This, yeah. Some of the things, you know, and you worked with the ERT and stuff, so we look for commonalities, but between people that experience some things. But that night of the scary disembodied voice, we drove home to my house. We lived about 45 minutes away from the ranch property. And that night I walked into the door and I fell to the ground, and my sister and my mom were yelling at me. I was paralyzed, catatonic. couldn't talk. I'm trying to say peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. Got my first full-blown migraine headache that night. But those kind of things, that sense of being watched, you know, just certain things like that kind of followed me. So that's what that's about. But something that did not make the episode of Beyond Skinwalker that first season was that night of that blizzard. You know, we went back to, and they don't even talk about the boxes on the episode, but why we went out back where we were walking, I was showing them where that box encounter happened. And the next day, my daughter and I, we met for lunch and we went shopping in Castle Rock to the outlet stores, went to Red Robin for lunch. And, you know, it was cold. So I'm buying long johns and things, you know, warmer gloves and things like that. And my back started bothering me. And I'm like, what is going on? And we went back up to my room, and on the back of my shoulder right here, that is what I discovered. It was hot to the touch. It almost looks like three
holy smokes.
A handprint. It was hot to the touch. It had blisters. I was wearing several layers of clothing. Katie. It kind of does. Right. And I had people coming up to me. Yeah. And so, you know, it was on there for 3 or 4 days, neosporin and all that stuff. But what's interesting is I'm like, oh my gosh, were you attacked by something bad? It doesn't necessarily, we need to be really careful when we assign good and bad to things, you know, because to me, I sometimes feel like I literally fell forward in the snow. I was just wearing jeans. I wasn't prepared. So my blue jeans were wet and I was freezing, and I had several layers of clothes on. So that was under that, but maybe it was something like trying to keep me from falling. I mean, it doesn't necessarily mean it was a bad encounter. It didn't feel bad to me. It didn't hurt necessarily, other than it just felt like a burn. It actually felt, so people have suggested, could it be a radiation burn? Was it something paranormal in nature? I don't know. But so many things, like we filmed for a week for that 44-minute episode, and so many things that happened out there didn't even make the episode. So I see it when everybody else sees it. But when I was communicating on the radio with the crystal radio in the house and everything, what doesn't make the episode is, at that same time, we were getting like radio transmissions talking about the Vietnam War. How does that happen? And also we were getting like EVPs, like they're looking for us, you know, that kind of thing. Oh my God. And those that didn't make the episode, and we were getting like Morse code clicks in the other room where nobody was, stuff like that. So some
of the stuff I hear, you know, from, and I will say from interesting people that I respect, we're not talking, we're talking people that are highly educated, are similar to what you're talking about now. But again, you know, so many people I feel in phenomenology are closed-minded to the high strangeness element of this phenomenon. It just, it can't be. It's absurd, you know, that they throw away the best evidence because it offends their senses, but it's meant to offend our senses.
Right.
So now, so we live in
a magical world.
We do. And now you were talking about that you felt perhaps this was protecting you. I was talking about when my dad and I used to camp over at Catalina Island. I have a story where I ran ahead of the hikers, and I'm going through the bushes. I was trying to like outrun them and be up front, right? So I'm running through these bushes, and something stopped me. I was running full bore ahead, right? You know, little, 10-year-old kid running as fast as I could. Something stopped me in my tracks. And I looked straight down, and I was at the edge of a 200-foot cliff. You could see a little sailboat way the heck down there in the rocks. That's what I would have hit. I know. So I feel like through my life, I have so many stories that are similar to that one. You know, a car accident we were in when I was 3 years old. We were in Utah and Utah. And, you know, our car landed upside down after going off a grade. And somehow or another, I got out of the car, and I was looking at the upside down car with the wheels spinning around. I didn't have a scratch on me. My last memory of before our car went off this cliff, more or less is what it was. It was not a steep cliff, but a sort of a graduated cliff. I remember seeing the blue sky. I remember seeing the clouds, and it felt like I was being pulled towards them. And the window was closed. It was shut in our station wagon. Door was not opened. It was locked when they found the car. Somehow, magically, miraculously, I was taken through the window, maybe, or I don't know how it happened. My dad called it a miracle. My mom didn't call it anything. She broke her back, but it was surgically, repairable. My dad had a little scratch, and it was like I was fine. I was just lying there watching the wheels spin, Yeah. And I could tell you probably 8 other episodes in my life where I should have died, and I feel like I was protected. So
I felt talking to Tom Miller from the Miller Ranch. He said that happened to him like 17 times where he's felt protected. Sally feels the same way. And interestingly, just a few weeks ago, I had something very similar, not a bad accident or anything, but I was getting ready to go to Guffey, which is about 20 minutes for where I am, to get the rest of some books I have over there. And we're walking out the front door. My big screen TV turns on. It turns on to a YouTube channel talking about, the little things about car accidents. It was really strange because A, my TV just doesn't naturally turn on. B, if it does turn on, it doesn't turn on to YouTube. And C, I don't watch things about car accidents. So I drove extra carefully that day. Yeah. And as I'm driving slow, this woman is on her cell phone and curves into my lane. It would have been a head-on collision. So I felt protected in that instant as well. I don't know if it was my mother, a guardian angel, or something else, but that happened. And
I don't know. We got the same guys, I think, that are helping us.
Yay!
We're about ready to end this show, believe it or not, Katie, amid all the craziness and being shut down midway through. Bill is telling me we have a few other photos we can run through quickly. We've got like 4 minutes. Olo.
Yeah,
I've never met that guy. Have you met him?
Yeah, that's the white fuzzy, the Sasquatch on the right. The darker colored one is from the original archives.
Called him white fuzzy.
White fuzzies from the 70s. And then the one is the one that Bob Sala sent me from Malmstrom. And they're very similar. Their noses, their eyes, the way their hair is. That's a side-by-side of the Malmstrom and the Rocky Mountain Ranch Sasquatch seen back in the 70s. Guy. Right. This is just an article about a mysterious blanket of metal found out there south of Rama, there in Elbert County. These we didn't even get into, but the sketch on the right with the tubes coming out, this was a sketch from the Rocky Mountain Ranch that was seen on the ranch property. They said there were 2 types of ETs, a Nordic type, a blonde, blue-eyed, and these guys here, I call them the tubey guys. The one on the left is drawn by somebody who lived 14 miles away that we didn't know. He said the tubes in the neck actually come out to the sides, but they both have the wrinkles, the heavy brow, the same shape eyes, and we didn't know of each other. And to have that happen was just like stunning to me. So there's something to that. That is the image on the right is what it looks like when a coyote jumps on a calf and starts ripping at it. This is a story that I went out to Wyoming and interviewed a witness that lived out south of Rama, and they owned many cattle. The husband was on horseback checking the cows for calves, came across a dead calf. He had 4 cuts in a perfect square. The top of the fur was removed, but the skin was still there. Gets on the horse, goes back, gets my witness. They go back to the calf. It took them about 20-25 minutes. When they got back, the calf was mutilated, cauterized, organs removed, blood drained. So it happened within that 20-minute frame. No truck marks, Yeah, and that's the picture of it. The one on the left is what they came back to. So she actually had the photographs of it. Yeah, no sounds. They felt like they were being watched. Blood was drained, organs removed. This is a recent encounter.
Bill is running through all of these.
Yeah, this is a recent encounter of who I call the elk hunter. He was out there hunting elk, coming back. It was dusk, 4 to 5 feet in diameter, 6 to 8 feet off the ground. He witnesses this metallic, silent craft UAP in the trees. The top was moving counterclockwise, the bottom was moving clockwise. He was stunned. It was emitting this red glow. And when we went back in the daytime to investigate it, it's right under where the elk, like an elk track. So again, there's this elk connection. And they find mutilated elk out in this area. So this was a recent sighting of this strange, mysterious something that disappeared. And we mentioned that D word, the drone. Was it some sort of a drone there? Was it our own military? Was it a actual UAP? But the thing just vanished. It vanished in front of them. So I don't think we have things that do that. I don't know. But
we have to go. We have to go here, okay. Katie. But let's one more time. What's your YouTube channel so that people can follow you? There we go. Rocky Mountain Ranch Research
with Katie Paige, and I would appreciate a subscribe and a like, and I have several videos on there if you kind of want to follow me as I journey to try to find answers to these questions that we all have. So I appreciate the support, and I really appreciate you having me on, Earl. It's always great talking with you and catching up, and we'll continue to try to uncover your mom's story,
Heck yeah. Well, you're going to see more of me you probably want, because I think you've got the key to my mom's story. Thank you so much, Katie, and thank you, listeners, and we'll see you next time.